Well, today on Practical Church Planting, we're going to share with you 5 common questions you get when you're leading an established church.
Welcome back to Practical Church Planting. My name is Brian Androsian, and with me is Dylan Dodson. And today we're going to give you 5 questions that you get when you're an established church.
And as we get ready to jump into that, this episode is brought to you by Ambassadors Ministries. Here's the question: wouldn't it be nice to have a larger paid staff? Everyone would say yes to
It
that.
would be nice. Yep.
To have more leaders that could give you dedicated time to the mission of God and for your church plant? Again, of course, the answer is yes, but as you know, many church plants' finances do not allow for it. Ambassadors Ministries wants to help. They enable you to help leaders you've identified by coaching them to fundraise either full or part-time supplement or salary at no cost to your church. They support them in all the administrative tasks of fundraising so you can remain focused at the hard work of church planting. If you want more information, check out ambassadorministries.com/practical. ambassadorministries.com/practical, or you can go on our show notes and there'll be a link there as well. And I just want to mention this. We've mentioned this often on Practical Church Planting, how fundraising we often think is just for maybe the lead pastor. Numerous staff over the 5.5 years at New City Church have raised funds to join staff at New City, and New City would not be possible or would not have done the things that it's done without that happening.
Yes.
So,
And I will say we have done things, we've had times where we've done things all in-house, fundraising,
yes.
managing the money and everything, and it is more hassle than it's worth, to put it frankly. So a way you can get another party involved is really helpful.
Yep. So they'll train you, coach you, and help you run all of that. ambassadorministries.com/practical. Be sure to check them out. Now, today we're talking about 5 questions you get when you're an established church. Last week, we talked about questions you get when you're a new church.
Yep.
So these kind of go hand in hand. The questions change after a while. I guess psychologically, people view it differently. And so some of the questions you get a lot in the beginning are not necessarily the ones you get a lot at the end. And so here's some ones you get more. Now, again, not saying you don't get these also sometimes in the beginning, but hear a lot of them now. Didn't always hear about them as much in the beginning. Number 1, what do you do for kids/students? Now, you might be thinking, don't you also hear that a lot in the beginning? And the answer is yes.
Yeah.
All I know is I just think I hear that more now. I think some of it might be people assume you're still trying to figure things out. But once you've been around for a while, particularly if you have maybe a building that you use and it's not portable, you might get this more.
Yeah.
But people want to know what's going on with kids and students. Sometimes people just don't know that you have it.
Yep.
Or if it's not visible, like in your front doors where it is, they might not know it exists at all. Or if maybe it's not clear on your website or anything like that. But what do you do for kids and students? Now, I do want to say this as well. With some of these questions, and we said this last week, it is okay if you don't have the perfect answer. At the end of the day, your church can only do what your church can do. And so, don't freak out too much if you don't maybe have the answer that they want.
Yeah.
But you need to have an answer for these things because people think it's kind of weird if you don't.
Yep.
So what do you do for kids and students? You'll get that.
And it's exactly right. It's important to have an answer. So I don't think so. We're not like doing these to say like this is what your answer should be, but it's just to think about what it is. So if you don't have students yet,
By students, we mean middle and high school.
right?
Sure.
Yep. If you don't have student ministry yet, you will get asked at some point what your plan for it is, or if you have one. And if you just kind of looked like deer in headlights, like you were hoping you wouldn't get that question, or you just hadn't thought about it before, that's gonna be real tough, especially if it's a family that has students. And I mean, obviously, if it's a family that has students, if the answer isn't we have one, then a lot of times it may be a little tough for them. I mean,
Yeah.
I get it, but it's much more encouraging to hear something along the lines of we don't have one, but here's our plan, or we're planning to do it at this point, or whatever it is, to just show that you've thought about it before, than to just act like it's not something that you ever cared about, even if you do care about it. But if you act like you don't have an answer to it, then it seems like it's not something that you even thought about before.
Yeah, and again, you might be discouraged or disappointed that someone might not go to your church if you don't have a student ministry. You also might think that if you don't have kids of student age yet.
Sure, yeah.
And so I think it's not to get offensive or to get upset, but like it's just understandable. Now, you might wish that they would come with their whole family, and I get that, but if it's important to them, it's important to them. Particularly, I mean, just being honest, if you're in America listening to this, they can go to another church that has it. So it's not like they don't have an option.
Options, yeah.
Now, for us, we've gotten this a lot. In the past, what I've said is we would love to do that. We just don't have someone who is passionate enough, has the time, and wants to lead it. And if that's the reason why you don't have it, you should say that. Now, again, they might leave to go somewhere else who don't have students or whatever.
Yeah.
But it's just honest. It's not like, well, we'd like to one day, or we've been thinking about it, and it just comes across as disingenuous when you really have no plan. So I think it's okay to say things like, and we'll talk about some of these other questions, we don't have it, we would like to have it, but in order for us to do it, we need somebody
Yeah.
to lead it, and maybe they're asking because they're that person.
Yeah. Yeah.
So-
We talk about this in the, like, when you're a new church, but even when you're established church, you don't have to act like you have every answer to everything or you have it all figured out. Like you're saying, in that case, you don't. And that's fine. But it's just being honest and not acting like you never expected to hear this question before.
And if you have kids ministry or student ministry, be able to answer it succinctly. And again, don't feel like you have to make it sound like it's this grand thing.
Yeah.
Here's where it is. Here's where they meet. Here's the age groups, or here's what they go over, and that's it. And be okay with it. Again, I think we just feel like anytime. Sometimes people like. Well, I think most of the time people are actually totally fine with that answer. Like they're literally just asking the question, but we have it in our mind that we have to impress them or make some really good answer.
Yeah.
If we think they're not going to like our answer, whereas if you just say, "Hey, here's where we are," or "Here's what we're doing," and being okay with it, I think a lot of people would be fine. But people will ask, so make sure you've thought about this.
Yep. Exactly.
What are you going to do for kids, or what do you do for kids and students? Number 2, you'll get this one. I think you'll also get often, but we get it more now than in the beginning. Is what do you do for community service or something along those lines? How do
Yeah.
you serve the community? Whatever. I have a little bit of annoyance with this question, not at the people who asked it, but here's just my experience. Many people want to be a part of a church that does stuff in the community, but they don't necessarily be the ones that have to do it. Like they'll show up maybe once a year or whatever.
Yeah.
But they love to say, here's what our church does. Or they really do intend to come, but they just don't often. Now, part of this, I think, can be a leadership thing in the sense that we haven't done the best at this, or I haven't always done the best with this. But I just learned that people love the idea. You do anything you do at New City, or not New City, at your church. People have ideas for things, but it's like, are they actually going to commit to coming to them themselves? Those questions aren't always the same.
Yeah.
And part of it for me too, and I'm not saying you say this, but like the church should impact the community, and it doesn't need to necessarily have organized monthly service projects for that to making a difference.
Sure. Yeah.
And having a monthly service project where 5 people show up, like that's not. It sounds great on paper, like here's what you do, but you're not actually doing anything. So I'm not saying don't do anything. I think you should do something. You find out in a second. I want us to do more than we're currently doing, but like, I don't know. I think people love the idea of it, but are they willing to do it themselves? There's not the disconnect there sometimes happening.
Yeah.
I don't mean to be a Grinch. Here's how we've answered it, because we have not done historically a ton of stuff. We've done various generosity initiatives, and now we're going to start doing like a quarterly thing, but still probably more focused on like donation based or supplies based. I had this at our last partnership lunch thing with new people. Somebody asked this question, and again, great question. And one of the things I said, and here's what I would recommend to you if you would like to do more than your church is currently doing. I said, it's a great question. Here's some of the things that we do, but we don't really do a lot of community service stuff. We would, just like the first question, we would like to do more, but right now we don't have someone who's passionate about this and has the time or desire to actually get this done. Because it takes some coordinating and figuring out who you're going to partner with in the community. Like you have to have someone who actually wants to do that, and maybe some administrative skills to make it happen. And so I told her, I said, we would love to do it. We're not doing as much as we would like right now because we don't have that person. But if we do have that person, more could happen. But here's what it looks like right now. And it's not what we want. But I didn't spend a lot of time like feeling bad or apologizing. It's just, it is what it is. And that's where we are.
Yeah. I mean, it kind of goes back to the other ones. You have to be honest about where you are and have an answer that you've at least thought of before. Like if it seems like you've never thought about community service before, that's going to be a problem for most people. And it should be. Like it should be something that you think about or have at least considered. And so having just an answer of where you are, and if you have an idea in mind of where you want to get to and a path of how to get there, then that's fine. And if you're not sure how to get to where you want to be, then just being honest about that as well, about how we don't have the capacity to do it or the personnel or whatever the case is in your situation. But just being honest about the situation you're in. And if you're doing something, then cool. And if you're not, then this is what we'd like to do, and this is how we plan to get there, or this is kind of the shortfall of why we're not there at this point.
And if you are doing stuff and it's like not really streamlined or all over the place, that'll be hard to answer. So maybe just think through like, here's what we're doing. Again, the thing is, don't over-explain or try to defend what you're doing, because then it can be rambly and unhelpful.
Yeah.
But people will ask about this. And again, if you don't have what you think is the answer that they would like, just be honest about where you're at, and it is what it is.
That's all you can do. That's all you can do is be honest, because that's what you're doing. So just being honest about what's the reality.
But in our experience, you will get that question more as an established church.
Yeah,
in
for
the
sure.
beginning. Number 3, how many people go to your church?
Or how big is your church?
Either one of those.
Yep.
Again, you might get this all the time. I get this a lot more now. And I just loathe this question.
Yeah, agreed.
And I don't sometimes it's hard to know what, like, especially if it's like someone I don't know well, like if I'm like, flying somewhere or someone they find out what I do, we're talking, and like, oh, it's like, are you a Christian? Are you not? Do you have any church experience? Like, if I answer this question, do you even know what this means?
Sure. Yeah.
And like, COVID has obviously changed things where like attendance isn't necessarily what it was before. And but anyway, people are going to ask it, and it's like, again, sometimes we're like, how do I answer the question? Do I have like total people? Do I have our number of members? Do I have our average attendance right now?
Yeah.
People will ask it a lot, and I would just try to find a way to answer it. Obviously, asking a lot of, I mean, it depends on the situation, but like clarifying questions could or could not be helpful, particularly if they're just like making small talk or whatever. But people ask it a lot, and I don't like it because I feel like it's in some ways unhelpful and doesn't really mean that much. I don't know.
Yeah.
But you get it a lot.
No, I agree, and I honestly I think most people ask it as just a what's even the word, like just making conversation kind of question, like, oh, you're a pastor, you work at a church, what size of church is it? And like, not even so much as if, I mean, if they're in the church world, it might be a different story, but if it's just kind of like an acquaintance, I feel like most people don't really care. That sounds wrong, but no, don't really care about what the answer is. It's more just like, tell me about your company kind of thing, more of that side of things rather than like, how much are you making an impact and how big of a church you are. So this is something that, at least personally, gotten more as we got older or more established. But of all these, probably got this earlier than the others, just because like even with a church plant, people are, if they have no experience with a church plant, then they're like, oh, like how many people are there? Does anybody show up? And for a while, we were small. I mean, we're still small, but like we were small at first, and it was like, I don't want to tell people the real number because this is a really bad Sunday and whatever. But at some point, I just like got tired. Like, I'll just be honest. Like, I don't know. So generally I'll just have like a range of it's X amount to X amount because that's kind of where we usually fall, and interpret that however you want. I mean, I'm not saying I'm right in saying that, but that's my kind of mindset of like, if you think this is big, then cool. If you think it's small, then cool. Yep. But it's the reality. And I found that like in the past when I was like, oh, we're this, but sometimes it's this big, or we just, some things just happened, or COVID happened, and so it really cut in our numbers, whatever. I found people's eyes just kind of like glaze over, and they're just like, I really was just trying to ask you a nice question or whatever. So I find just like a general range. Obviously we don't have a perfect number, or I mean like an exact number of people that come because it fluctuates. I just say we're about this size, X amount of people to X amount of people, and most people just say, cool, and that's it.
Yeah, and I think too, even if someone is genuinely interested in this question, saying things like, well, here's what our average is, but if everyone were to show up, it would be this.
Yeah.
And on our good Sundays, it's this, but a lot of people are out of town. It's like people are always out of town. So trying to judge like, whether it's this question or just anything in general, there's never a time where everybody's just going to show up at your church, unless you're like less than 20 people and you can count everybody and everyone just showed up once. Like that's never a thing. So just like, no, like whatever you're averaging is just kind of what it is. People will ask that. Again, there's also, a pride, ego thing that can be attached to this, or not wanting people to feel like you're a failure, so you can maybe ramble on. But people will ask this. I would just say, whatever the number is, just be comfortable saying it. Yeah. And if they want to ask more questions, they can, but like, don't feel bad. Don't feel like you have to defend it. It just is what it is.
It just is what it is. And people have, like, you have no idea what kind of experience someone's coming with. We live in a city that has some like really large churches and some really small churches. So like even just locally, there's people that have asked this question, and I've said, and some people give you the look of like, oh, it's a small church, and other people are like, oh, that's great. And it's like, it's like you just have no idea what their background is, and so it's just easier just to tell them the truth, not try and work your way around it.
So how many people go to your church? You'll get that a lot. There you go.
Yep.
Give it a succinct answer.
Yep.
Number 4, can we meet to talk about whatever? So you get that a lot more. I think people just trust you more. I think I've learned too that if the church just looks like it's more established or it's been around for a while, there's just some credibility than if you're a new church and it looks new and people just, I'm not saying it's right or wrong, it's just the assumption people make. So like people, like now that we're more years into this, people that I don't know are much more likely to meet to talk about something or want to talk about something than they were in the beginning. Yeah. Now granted, we've got more people now too, so the likelihood of that is also higher. But they'll do it. And I just want to say this too. A lot of times, I think we did an episode on this a little bit about asking good questions. We did. I don't know, in the last couple months. You can maybe listen to that when you have these things. A lot of times people are going to want to talk to you about something that you can't give a good answer to. Yeah. Or maybe you can give advice to, but you're not sure if your advice is good. And so my encouragement is to always ask a lot of questions and see how you can help and what you can pray for. Because I honestly, what I found is that more than anything else, people just want someone to talk to or to vent through or to think out loud with.
Yeah.
And you can be a great person for that. So there's some things going on in our church right now, some really hard stuff with some people. And it's like, I have no advice to give you.
Yeah.
And years ago, I would have felt very pressure filled, like, oh, I got to say something that's helpful. And now I'm like, but I can just sit with you. And I know it doesn't feel like a lot, but I can pray for you, say I'm going to pray for you, and just listen to how you're feeling. I mean, there's something that my wife and I were good, but we've got some other family stuff going on outside of our immediate family that, like, if somebody were to come to me and be like, hey, I want to talk about this, I also would not know what to tell them.
Yeah.
Other than just to sit with them and say, man, that really stings. And here's how I can be praying, or how do you want me to help? And so you're going to get more of that. And my encouragement is just don't feel like you have to be the person who's always giving advice. Just listen. And people will often think that's more helpful than you giving them advice anyway, because oftentimes us giving people advice, if there's something they don't even already want to do, they're less likely to follow it. So you get more people asking you just to talk about random things, and don't feel the pressure to have to give them answers. Just sit with them.
Yeah. Most people don't want advice. Just
Yes.
put it out there.
Even even people say they want advice about this,
Yeah.
and we meet, and it's like, I don't know that you really want advice, more so you just want to talk about it.
Yeah.
So
Like, I don't know if you've ever had this experience where, like, if you're going through something, you talk to someone, they're just like giving you all the things. Now, I'm not talking about like I have a sin issue I'm dealing with and giving advice based on that, but like, you know, we're going through this like tragedy or this difficult thing or whatever, and here's all the things that I did when I went through it, or here's all the things that will work. It's like, you know, thanks. You know, but most people don't, especially if it's like a difficult situation, like a not tragic or grieving kind of situation. People don't want to be just like a checklist of here's all the things you do and then it'll be all better. Like that's not what people want. But especially, I think like I think this question, it's kind of good that it comes a little bit later in church life, because I think especially like I think the more mature you are, the less likely you are to just throw out advice than to listen. And so I think, I mean, I don't know, for myself, like earlier on, I probably would have been quicker to just give advice rather than just listen. But now kind of I understand that that's kind of the way that people work. But just listen to people, and people will think that you had like a really great meeting. And honestly, like you did. Like that's one of the best things you can do is listen to people, pray with them, and care for them, not just here's all of my advice and experience that I've amassed over, 30 years or 25 years or whatever, over the short life that we've all had. So.
Yep. So can we talk about it? Say yes. Don't, and even when they ask to talk about it, like, don't even come with like, well, I'm not sure what to tell you or whatever. Just meet with them and listen and ask good questions. But you'll get that more. Maybe this is not surprising, but the more you continue on at it.
Yes.
And last but not least, this is not so much maybe a question, but last week we talked about when you're a church plant, people sometimes will assume there isn't much for you to do. And on the flip side, when you're established, people will assume you're always busy. Part of that is just our culture, and busy is like the cool thing, and everyone thinks they're busy. And if you've listened to this podcast for a while, you will know that I don't like that word. And I think it's people are busy because they don't manage their time. That's why they're busy. But anyway, I'll just say this all the time, even if you listen to this, like, we know what you're going to say. Always tell people that you are not busy, because I think this is one way to help lead people well, to show them that this is not a virtue. I get that you don't want people to think you're lazy, but I'm not lazy, and I know I'm not lazy, so I don't care if people think I'm lazy. To say that. And so you go out of your way to say you're not busy, or if you're meeting with someone, like if they make that comment, they like, no, I'm here. I even like, so like we record this on a Monday, and yesterday at church, someone asked if they could meet with me. And then last night we had some people over, had a conversation about someone that I'm going to meet with. And I felt bad because this week I have no time, but I was like, hey, I have a really full week this week. So not busy, full. But I said, I'd love to meet with you. I'm going to email you my calendar. But just so you know, there's no slots available this week, but I know I would love to meet with you. And whether that's normal or not, even if you're always like that, which I don't know, depending on the size of your church, I have a hard time believing, unless you're a larger church.
Yeah.
If you like, I think it's okay to say like, hey, I or maybe whatever. You typically have to schedule things 2 to 3 weeks out. I think always just throwing something in there like, I really love to meet. I've got some availability in 2 weeks. Here are the times, whatever. But not making it seem like you're busy and I just have to fit you in. I think people are much less likely to want to talk to you. And by the way, this is our job.
Yeah.
So if we don't answer email, or if we don't meet with people, or if we don't respond, people are going to assume that we're busy. And so you have to fight that actively. Even if you're someone who's not always busy. It's like, why do people think I'm busy? I don't know. They just do.
Yeah.
And so we're going to say that. And my encouragement is to like proactively say you're not busy and say you have time for people, even if you have to move things around, they're going to assume you're busy and you'll be able to pastor people less because people will be less likely to reach out.
Yeah, people are the what you do, are the what we do. Like it's the most, like, more important than everything, but just about everything. Like, and this is why we talk about things like getting ahead in sermon prep and things like that, because you can sacrifice some of that if you need to for somebody. Where if you're, obviously this is a whole nother topic, but where if you're coming down to the wire every week, you kind of can't, because you got to be ready for Sunday morning. But if you're managing things well and far enough ahead that things can be a little fluid if you need them to, then, I mean, obviously, like the one-off weeks and whatever that, like you're saying, that you have to push something out, that's perfectly fine. But you shouldn't be able to, or you shouldn't have to not be able to meet with somebody, or at least tell them when you can meet with them. But if it's always like, I got so much going on, I have no idea when it's going to happen, I'll try and fit it in.
Yes.
Then it's like, man, all the tasks that comes with being a pastor are more important than the people you're pastoring, which obviously none of us would actually say that out loud, but that's what we're doing. That's what we're saying when we're saying that. So.
And maybe you don't have enough staff, whatever, so you have a lot going on and you have to push things out a couple weeks. Again, there's nothing wrong with that. And I think a lot of times people actually expect that, but just being sure that they know that this isn't happening because maybe you are busy, maybe you actually are, and there's either, even if it's not your fault, there's some things that need to change. If people feel like that, they're going to feel awkward. They're even like, I've even noticed, so I use Calendly, talk about this a lot. You can get it for free, and so it's really easy for me to send people a schedule, but it's like an hour long.
Yeah.
And so sometimes we're getting close to the hour, and then people will be like, well, I know we got to wrap up here soon.
Yeah.
And sometimes it would be helpful if that was the case.
Yeah.
But because I want I always say, no, I'll typically say something to the effect of, no, I'm not busy or I have the time. Mm-hmm. I always typically plan 90 minutes in my personal calendar. Like even on Calendly, there's a buffer between and after. So if someone picks something they can't pick right away.
Directly after. Yeah.
So I plan in some of that buffer, but they're trying to respect your time. And I've just noticed that for us, even though we're not a big church, but we'll be getting to the hour and well, I know you got places to be. And it's sometimes I do, but I've just got to be willing to put people first. And so you can't talk about being busy or live this busy lifestyle. As a side note, highly recommend John Mark Comer's book, The Ruthless Elimination of Hurry. Mm-hmm. It was amazing. And that might help you if you're wrestling with this idea of busyness and what to do and all that sort of thing. I recommend that book.
Yep. Always make time for people, because that's the reason that you're
and it helps.
That you're doing what you're doing.
We've got different stuff on this podcast about scheduling time and sermon prep or whatever. It really helps when you are pretty scheduled with your time, because then you can move things around. If you know how long this takes, even if you typically do it at this time on this day, you just got to move things around. And sometimes there might be a little bit more going on than other weeks. But if you're also well, I've got this amount of things I got to do this week, and I'll just kind of get to them when I get to them, it becomes a lot harder and a lot more stressful to move things around, because you're am I going to have time to get to it?
Yeah. Yep.
So those are 5 questions you get when you're an established church. Now, again, this might be one of the least practically helpful episodes we've ever done.
Well,
because we're asking the questions, not necessarily answering them,
at
least.
But the whole thing is anticipating the questions.
Yes,
really,
that's right. So think through those things. Again, what do you do for kids or students? Community service. How big is your church? Can we talk to meet? And assuming you're not busy, just think through what you're going to say, so that you have something to say, so that people aren't caught off guard. And again, most people, if you just say something confidently, they don't have a problem with it. Yeah. It's when we over-explain that people are like, that was weird. Yeah. So don't do that.
Yep, very true.
But speaking of which, if you are looking for something practical, again, ambassadorsministries.com/practical. I think I said ambassador in the beginning. It's Ambassadors Ministries with an S.
Yep.
It is plural. .com/practical. Check out all their stuff for getting fundraising. Again, you might be feeling busy and overwhelmed because you don't have enough people on staff.
Yeah, true.
So check that out. Also, some other things in us, practicalplanting.com, tons of free resources. And if you're on Facebook, the Practical Church Planting Facebook group. So that's all we have for this week. We'll be with you next week on Practical Church Planting.